Alright, it's Paul, and it's Y&R Update. Welcome back. I gotta jump right into things. We had one hell of an episode. Things started off with Dylan and Nick at the coffee house. Now, Nick was waiting for Sharon, and Sharon was late, and Dylan defended Sharon, and Nick sort of got a little frustrated, but he sort of backed off after a while. Now, you can really see something is brewing between Dylan and Sharon. It looks like he's developing this need to sort of protect her. Next, we see Avery and Joe, and Avery and the whole Joe thing, it sounds like a broken record. She tells Joe to quit wasting his time, regarding him sending her, the old wedding dress, and Joe goes into a whole shtick about him sort of having altruistic reasons. You know what's developing there. It looks like they're sort of two magnets that can't help but head towards each other, but everybody's outraged. I'm sure they are, because they know that Joe has got an agenda and he's kind of scummy. But we're going to see how that plays out. Then we see, actually, Noah tell his dad that Austin was digging up dirt to do a hatchet job on the Newmans. So that's sort of some progress along that lines, because they're starting to expand the people that they tell about what Austin was up to. And Kyle seems to be on a mission of his own. It's to really muck up a lot of dirt on Stitch, and he tells Abby that Stitch was threatening Austin in the video. In fact, he embellishes it a bit and says that Stitch had a starring role in the video. So we know that Kyle has an agenda, and it also looks like Stitch has an agenda as well. We then see Stitch tell Victoria that someone was watching the house, and that he has suggested that Abby move to the hotel, actually temporarily, for her own protection. And then Vicky turns around and surprises even me and says, to Stitch, well, why don't you go stay at the hotel as well so that you can look out for her? Because Stitch has told her that he's gotten security, for their house, and he has ex-military guarding the hotel so that Abby's totally safe. But Vicky insists, and Stitch says okay. So it's kind of looking a little suspicious there. Then we see Sharon show up at the coffee shop. She talks to Nick, and she apologizes for being late and says, Faith was having a real hard time getting going. But Nick has listened to his brother Dylan, and now is cutting Sharon a break. In fact, he goes one further when Faith asks Sharon to stick around for breakfast and join the two of them, even though it's Nick's time with her. And Nick shocks Sharon by, saying it's okay that she stick around. So we're kind of seeing Nick thawing, or at least trying to thaw out a bit as far as Sharon goes. Then we see Kevin start to speculate what Stitch's motivation is. I mean, Kevin's doing a lot of work in the background trying to figure out who's threatening them, and he's starting to look at Stitch as a suspect and starting to question his behavior. Next we see Joe, and he tells Avery that he needs her to be his attorney because he's behind some philanthropic association that needs his help, and he needs her to look over papers. Initially she's skeptical, but then she starts talking about his past and his father and his upbringing, and she sees that, or thinks at least, that Joe might be doing this for magnanimous reasons. So we see more thawing as far as Joe goes through Avery's eyes. Alright, we see Sage show up while Sharon's having breakfast with Nick, and Sharon immediately offers to leave, but really doesn't leave. She sort of disappears from the room, and then we see Sage trying to warm up young Faith. And Faith, it's the same thing as when Avery dated Nick. Faith can't stand any other woman in her life, and she's pretty cold to Sage and almost sends her packing. Alright, then we see Stitch show up at Abby's door, and it just looks so suspicious. He tells Abby, about the ex-military guarding the place, and he said that he's going to be staying in the room next to her. She questions him, but he says to her that Vicky is on board with this. In fact, she insisted on it, and that he's just looking out for her. But she starts to get a little suspicious. She's even more suspicious when she finds out that Stitch hasn't told her a thing about the intruder, writing on the mirror, or that there was even, that much of a threat. He said that he was suspicious that somebody was lurking around the place, but he didn't really let Vicky in on the fact that someone had actually been in the place. Stitch also admits that he hasn't told her anything about Austin's murder at all, and Vicky is pretty much in the dark about what's going on. He just knows that there is some sort of threat as far as Abby goes, and it's unrelated. Obviously, Abby has some questions as to why he hasn't brought Vicky up to speed, almost like it's leaving her in danger. Next, we see Kyle show up at Vicky's place, and he's looking for Abby. She tells him what's happened as far as Abby going there, and the fact that Stitch will be staying at the hotel. And Kyle is automatically suspicious, but he also uses this as an opportunity to plant doubt in Vicky's head about what Stitch's motivation is, and why he's actually staying so close to her. So Vicky at first doesn't really think anything of it, but then she starts to, you can tell there's some seeds of doubt as far as what's going on and why Stitch has to be that close, or why he took her up on her offer for Stitch to stay there. Next, we see Abby is questioning Stitch's motivation, and it gets a little bit creepy because Stitch gets sort of aggressive. Abby kind of turns to take off out of the room, and Stitch runs to the door and blocks her path. And we kind of leave it there, and it looks like Stitch is almost holding her there by force. Abby also goes further with this, and she asks Stitch if he's responsible for all the threats that are going on. Next, we see a kind of a weird scene. Now, Sharon hasn't really been introduced to this whole Austin thing, but we see Kevin questioning if Sharon may be a suspect in this whole thing. She had car trouble that night. Her car actually crashed. Kevin's not leaving any stone unturned, so he does sort of have some questions as far as Sharon goes. We do see a weird situation where Sharon does overhear Kevin talk about keeping the stuff in Austin's computer safe. Next, Sharon comes over to the table where Noah and Summer are sitting, and she tries to play nice with Summer, but Summer's not having any of it. She lets Sharon have it. She's really tired of watching Sharon trying to insinuate herself back into her life. But Noah defends his mother, and he sort of reminds Summer that, they're involved in something where each of them thought that, they were capable of murder, and he jumped to her defense. He said sometimes it's not always what it seems, and that Sharon has been through a rough time, so maybe, it would help him out if she could go easy on his mom. In fact, he goes one better later, saying that, it's his goal to lock the two of them in a cell until they get along, and Summer sort of kind of realizes that maybe she might want to cut Sharon a bit of a break, so she backs off a bit. And then we see Kyle talking to Vicky again, and he tells her about Austin's documentary and the hatchet job that he was doing on her family. And he also tells her that Stitch knew about it, and really plants more seeds of doubt into Vicky's head when he questions why Stitch would not tell Vicky about the documentary or his involvement in it. And Vicky starts to get a little suspicious. Then we see Nick and Sage, and they're over at the hotel in the bar, and he comes up to Sage, and she preemptively tells him that she understands why he's severing ties with her, but he turns around and surprises her by saying that he's not severing ties with her, he's apologizing for Faith's behavior, and in fact that he's committed to seeing where things go with her. And it sort of ends with them having a passionate moment at the bar, making out. So we'll see what happens on we'll see how that develops. And then we see more of Joe and Avery, and he's really trying to con Avery and let her know that based on his past he's got good motivation as far as this cause that he's taken up. But Dylan shows up at that moment, and Dylan's temper, he gets fired up, and he accuses her of not seeing through him, and she sort of puts him back on his heels. She then tells Dylan that Joe's motives are pure in this case, and it is for a good cause, and he has come seeking legal counsel, and she's going to help him out. She leaves, almost like she's saying, yeah, you're spending time with Sharon, so I'm going to help Joe out. So she leaves, and then the two guys are left together, and we see them go at it again. But it's mostly Dylan taking the offense on this one. So Dylan tells Joe he's sick and tired of him trying to weasel his way back into Avery's heart and whatnot. And this time Joe takes the high road because he seems to think that he's gained ground, and he sort of leaves it at that, leaving Dylan fuming. Then after Noah asks Summer to go easy on Sharon, we see Summer kind of start to suspect that maybe Sharon has something to do with Austin's murder. And now we've got two people thinking that Sharon is somehow wrapped up in this. So the writers are obviously throwing us giant-sized breadcrumbs. So more speculation. This has got to be the episode of speculation, because we see Stitch turn around now, and Stitch is actually saying to Abby that he thinks that Austin might have found out a secret about Victor, and that might have motivated him to do his tell-all. So it looks like Stitch is covering his tracks and sort of trying to throw doubt wherever he can, and now we're looking at Victor as maybe having some deep-seated secret. I mean, it's bad enough that Noah was in a situation where he had to defend his mom to his sister, but they leave the room and we see Sharon sort of cozy up to the computer that's left alone, because Kevin's left the room as well, and she starts to make a grab for the computer to sort of pull it out of its case. And as she does that, Kyle walks in, and not only does Kyle walk in, but Noah walks in and Summer walks in, and they want to know what the hell she's doing, and obviously she's standing there looking as guilty as sin, like a deer in the headlights. So it's heating up, and we know that this is going to culminate with something big. It's just, the writers are just intent on keeping us all guessing. The last scene that we see is a doozy. We see Stitch and Abby, and we know that there's some sort of tension or chemistry brewing, and he tells her, now that he sort of has her convinced that he's looking out for her best interest, that he's going to keep her safe no matter what it takes. And they have a moment. Abby's upset, and they embrace, and just as they embrace, of course, Vicky pokes her head in the door, and we know that her antenna is already up. And so this is going to put more suspicion on Stitch and more doubt in her head. So something big is coming. But that's all we have for today. So you're going to have to stay tuned for what happens next. But I will keep you posted as I see it. It's Paul, and it's Y&R Update. Thanks for checking me out. See you tomorrow.